Wanted to make a video about a few topics that were kind of on my mind, and I thought that it's just worth me talking about. It is probably another long shot, but it is, worth it because I don't know who Marco's biological father is. It's not to say that it could be Lucio. I mean, the kids kind of look like him, but there's a chance that it's not. And I wanted to say this because Marco, when I was living in my mother's apartment, he says, Julian is driving a BMW, which a BMW is something like a fairly new car. Was BMW's starting price, I think, is like $40,000 minimum. That's like the starting price. 35 to 40,000, and that's like a really good deal, brand new. And that's like the lowest of BMWs, and they go all the way up to, like, I think at least the domestic ones, people, unless you go to like a Lamborghini shop, they'll go up to like $200,000. And but he said that he drove a BMW, and my mother said something about then a couple years ago, or a year ago, or earlier this year, said that Marco drove a brand new car, and he got into a wreck. Or did she say she got into a wreck? I don't know if she did. But anyway, I was thinking, Katy Perry, the famous singer, the number one singer of all time, broke the record, sold records like several more, broke more records than I think a few more different records than Michael Jackson did. And I was thinking, I know that if this all celebrity stuff, or whoever was, involved with who's going to get in and who's going to go out, if that was Katy Perry, because on the other side of the hill, there was there were just a bunch of rich white people, and that was just considered as the rich people. I never hung out with any of them, but just a few of them. And one of the kids' names that I used to hang out with occasionally was Chris Kemp. And I met his father, and I knew his mother, and I didn't know his mother was a transgender, but I know his mother is. And I went to school with his sister, who I think also is a transgender, and I actually played a musical instrument with Chris Kemp. And this is a long shot to even think that, who's to say that my mother's Marco's biological father could be connected to over there, because if there was a lot of problems with who was going in and out, because when I was 18 years old, I talked about that they were all racist over there. The reason I say that is because a bunch of them came over around Daniel Box when I was younger, and I knew how they behaved, and they were it was straight up white power. It was straight up like, we got to take control, who's a Mexican. And so they saw me, and I remember they were very scolding in their attitudes, and they were kind of confronting Daniel like, what are you hanging around him for, and what are you doing with him? And so I could see those expressions, and it was so weird. This is the communication between, you start to see a lot of the racism. You start to figure out, okay, so I've known this kid for 10 years, smoked weed, and did all these. They don't even know this person, but they talk like they know who he is and his family. We're best friends there in childhood. It's an allied bond. But I wanted to say that because if it caused a ruckus over there, then it would have bled over here. And that's why, everyone, it's too late now, obviously, but it's not to say that something happened, because there's a lot of suspicion of who the biological father is, and I don't know who that is. Who's to say he's not a white guy and he's not from over there somewhere? Because Ginger, who I was in a relationship with, and we had sex several times, a number of times, I didn't know, but I said this, and I made a video, that she came out of the house with Nathan or this guy that pulled a knife on Michael Rossiter, and they had a knife fight in the front yard. And one day when I was DJing, and he just came in barging in the house, and I made a video on that. But this was many years ago. I was about 18 years old, and I saw this girl, Ginger, and Michael never liked her, and I think it was with Nathan, and they were getting a mixer because they had a party at that house, and I thought it was very important for me to say something because I don't know because by the time I'm 18 years old, 16, 17 years old, I don't know whatever is going on with any situation. The reason I say this is because the last 2 weeks I've really kind of been sort of circling in this thought of Katy Perry. I had her for a class, and I talked about that Katy, it looked exactly like her. In fact, I still think it is, but I'm not sure. I'm like 40% if it was her. And the reason I say about 40% was I know she said 100%. She said Katy. She looked exactly like her, but I was only in the class, and I saw her for a couple of weeks, for like 3 weeks before I ended up getting transferred out of that class for one reason or the other. I don't remember for what reason. And I know that I think she was either transferring to a different school eventually, and I remember Andy Hoppan telling me as he was walking by, and it was weird because, people always got Andy Hoppan's attention, and they were always saluting him, and he was always... But I was like this Mexican mustache kid in the background that when he saw me in the hallways, he looked at me and he goes, "Oh, I know who you are," because he doesn't, it's so weird because none of these people even grew up with him and they were best friends with him before he ended up dying in a motorcycle accident. And, but I was really good friends with him. And anyway, I talked about the stories of him plenty of times. And, but I remember walking down the hall and she would always hug him before, and I thought, oh, that must be his girl or whatever, and I remember walking by and he told me, I don't know where it was, if it was also in that hallway, but he said that, he goes, "Man, that girl can sing, dude." He was like, "Man, she can sing, dude. Yeah, she's a singer. She can sing." And I don't remember because at the time I was already DJing, and I talked about what happened in that class. I saw her and all this whole situation, but, and I was 100% opportunity, but, and I knew the difference between how the chemistry between what women are attracted to and men and young guys and what they're looking for is why reasons they look for older guys. But anyway, one time I want to say that I remember hearing the teacher said, Katy, the last name, she said Katy, but I'm like 40 or 50% that she said Perry. And I remember thinking in my class, gosh, that's a pretty name. I remember I was like, gosh, that's a really pretty name, Katy Perry. I thought that was such a beautiful name. And I know it sounds wild. At this point in my life and everything that's going on, it does seem like it's very easy if it is her, for me to kind of latch on to whatever bullshit, fame or whatever. Unfortunate. I'm 40 years old. I'm washed up, and this wasn't a Romeo and Juliet. I just knew what was going on, and she did as well. And there isn't a doubt in my mind at how I approached this girl. I would have gotten her number without a doubt. Without a doubt. I knew that whatever guys were in her life, she hadn't really come across particularly someone like me. But it wasn't really just me necessarily hitting on her, because I knew that when Andy was hugging her, they didn't really kiss, and it was just kind of like, well, maybe they're just talking. And when you're young like that, people are just talking, you don't really know if they're dating, and there's still an open door. So, I thought it was important, because if she's the one that made a music video last Friday night at that house, and I talked about that, I think the reason they got really wealthy in the beginning or someone, because there was like a sprinkler problem, and I think they put that in the video, or they sued somebody and got real rich or something. I don't know, but I do remember walking home, and she used to drive in her Jetta, and she saw me several times, and this was like probably a year or two. This is like a year after I had already gotten out of that class. Maybe later than that. So I don't know if it was her. Maybe it's not even her at all. And there you go, if it's not. But I was thinking, that was pretty much the end of it, because I don't know how much of any of this information could have ever happened, because, if I met Michael Jackson and all this stuff was going on, what else people wanted to get away with? How people were house sitting. God even knows how many other people were house sitting. I think that was the reason why they made Black Lives Matter. I think that was the reason why they did that. And I think the reason everyone went crazy on this and started promoting Black Lives Matter and billboards and all these t-shirts was because they found out that very few black people, if any black people, were actually house sitting, and it was a bunch of white people that were getting the keys thrown to them, and they were house sitting for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, never paying a mortgage bill, and made everyone else suffer and hard work, and because they were black. And there was no justice to it, and I think that was why. Because I know that it happened with several other people. It didn't happen with my dad and my family. That's for damn sure. My dad was too dark complected. My dad was Native American Indian, and he was not a handsome looking guy. My father was not a model figure looking man, but very confident, supreme confident. But it doesn't change the fact that in the world that we live in, the realities of where your looks actually take you, and how many open doors you'll get because of that skin tone, hair tone, and your looks. But like I said, I think it's important because I still don't know. I still ponder who the biological father may be, and it isn't going to change really anything. I think that the fact that Frankie would have liked for us to all get together, and he would have been with like Julian and Marco and be like, oh, they're twins. And I think Frankie knew somewhere when I was about 18 years old. Because if Julian didn't want to tell me, then Frankie was probably likely not to want to tell me. But you got to understand that the entire time that Frankie's entire childhood, Frankie is getting his ass ripped open. That is all that is fucking happening. He is just getting his ass ripped the fuck open by adults. So I think it's important because I drew these pictures. I said it was 10 homosexual rapists. There's an enormous amount of, it's difficult because it's left with me. And Frankie's not saying anything, and he knows he doesn't say anything because my mother partially knows, and as he's having his ripped open. So when my mother gets a brand new house, that house is covered with anal fluid and blood. Totally ripped open. It's fucking mangled. Fucking just a little boy being ripped open by these grown men for sex. And whoever the psychologists were, because I was raped and molested as well. And it was fucked up because the way that my mother did it with me is that she just moved on from it. So she moved on forward so much that she was just like, would tell me something she didn't know would happen. And my mother, given the fact that she's very poorly educated, that's the way that she functioned. And it's not her fault, because I know that she wanted to protect me and Frankie, and she did. But you have to understand that my mother's not a big person. It is a too late. It's a too late cause of a situation. The reason I grabbed my stomach is because I shot an electronic device at me. I think it's important for me to say this because who's to say who else my mother got sold for sex to? If she had probably sex with other people that try to get her pregnant? Possibly. I find the fact that the reason that in my personal opinion, there's two reasons why Lucio would have fucked my mother right next door to where I was in my room, and I had to hit the fucking wall to tell him to stop. Because my mother had just gotten ran over. I talked about that my mother got ran over by a forklift. And if my mother got ran over by a forklift, And when I walked into that room, she was doped up on pills. Like I was fucking disturbed. I was like I was just really disturbed. I was really disturbed by it because I'd never seen her like that. I mean, in any drugged up, my mother doesn't do drugs, smoke, or drink. And she sort of started getting emotional with me, like to wanting me to feel sorry for her. And I did feel bad, but nobody understood. There was extreme tension between me and this guy. Like, I wanted to kill this guy. I didn't like him. I wanted to beat him up. And it was very tense. Like, we were waiting for, every time we were around, I was just waiting for a fight to happen. There was nothing good about walking in the house like that. I wouldn't even want to make eye contact with him in the house. And we lived in a fucking 1,500 square foot house, 3 bedrooms, and there's like 5 of us. So I think it's important for me to say this because because when my mother got ran over by a forklift and she was all doped up, and like within a couple of days, I can hear him having sex, and I can hear the bed squeaking, and my mother has her entire leg bolted, fucking bolts, and metal bars in her fucking leg. And I couldn't believe that anybody wouldn't have the respect for just a moment that if you're the father's kid, if you're the father of Marco, and you're supposed to be looking out because you're going to the hospital, then why is it that you are having sex with her and you just can't wait? My mother, through 2 or 3 weeks, this guy, my mom was separated from this guy. I don't think his sex drive was that much. And I think it's important for me to say this because they keep hitting the door and they keep shutting doors, and they're trembling my chest. And that's what they're doing. They're just toying with me right now. And it's because I have a crucifix, and then they're just playing their religious persecution against me. But I think it's important for me to say this because if he doesn't turn out to be the father, I don't know who that would be. You know, I said this, that maybe it was like Eric Quintero's biological father, because he kind of looks like Eric Quintero, my brother does. Marco looks like, and his twin, they look kind of like they could be half brothers. So I think it's important for me to talk about because I don't know what the circumstances are. So, you know, it is too late. It's hard for me to take and understand how Frankie was having his ass ripped open beyond anything, and this is all about Ken and Sarah Cooper and their family and helping them and making them heroes. Because every time, I just got back from the grocery store, every single bus driver, every single person I come around and at the grocery store, all they're doing is training me and forcing me to believe that Sarah, Ken Cooper, and Kenneth and Madison are nothing but heroes, nothing but let's feel sorry for them. And they do very specific actions around me. And the energy and the persecution of what their actions toward me on a personal note is always in their defense. They don't give a fuck. They want to make sure that they make Kenneth a hero and put him in a certain place where it benefits the chessboard and this chess piece of game where Frankie's getting his ass ripped open. Kenneth knew all about Miguel being raped the entire time. Manipulated me, my mother. He stood in front of the casket, told me to buy. If he's sitting there telling me to also, this is not just because he tried to trick me, but he wanted me to buy this grow kit, marijuana grow kit, and he knows of the twins and all this other shit and police. That person is setting me up to get busted because it's very calculated. It's like drug deals. So I think it's important because my mother is no longer here anymore. She mentally, and something happened to her. Her twin is entirely representing her, and Frankie was it's hard for me to understand how I'm getting my ass ripped open. I'm seeing blood. I'm seeing my brother get raped. I see my mother, get sold for sex and prostitution. I have a sister that dies, and nobody gives a fuck. They just buy my mother a house and they just say, oh, look, we'll fix everything. And that wasn't the truth. And then they raped me with a transgender that was my mom's sister's friend. So the psychologists and the people that were involved did that on purpose. There's no way a milestone that you are going to have any good mental state to take care of a house and kids when you know your kids are being ass raped. Frankie, and brutally, my mother had to have said there was 10 people that raped Frank. You know, my mother didn't roll. My mother still to this day was only there for probably 7 of them are new, or 6 of them. But that's exactly what's happening. Frankie knows my mother knows. My mother knows that Frankie knows that she knows. So what happens with this situation is that there's nothing that can be really done. There's nothing that can be really done about this. That I think it's important for me to say, because Frankie's having his ass ripped open. I mean, I'm walking him from school, and he does not. I asked him, why are you crying? And in some of these days, he wasn't. He wouldn't go to Skived's house, and he can barely walk. Who's to say that somebody didn't rape him one day, that I didn't walk home from school with him, because I walked home from school with him every day? Someone else did. I believe that number's higher. I do believe that number's higher than it. I wrote the number and it was like 11 confirmed, and it was over 10. I believe that there was someone else that I just did not see at all. That I didn't see, I didn't catch him. Frankie just didn't say anything. I do believe it was someone else, and at least one other person. So I think it's important because my mother gets a $400,000 house, and he sets a triplet show up, and they did everything to make Kenneth Cooper a hero, and it's his people that are doing it, the transgender and the whites. That's all that's doing it, and there's no bigger fault to the point at the president. He's the one that allowed it and did it for political needs and power. He knows how to. I was thrown to sleep next to a trash can in real life, nearly sticking my hands in trash cans for food, and being forced to do this. Every person that came around me that knew about Kenneth and the white supremacists and the gay movement for the transgenders, Barack Obama's transgender daughter. Oh, that's right, in the White House. And all the gays are in the government office, and all the gays. It's difficult for me because I was so innocent, and everything that I ever did for my father, everything I did for my brother, I got nothing. I got fucking nothing. And then the people that gave me money, which was Ken and Sarah Cooper over my dad's funeral, I had to say, oh, thank you for not telling me. And my mother and father, here's $5,000. You're stupid. My mother is as smart as a fucking shoebox. She does not fucking understand. And I know this better than any of the 3 kids other than Frankie. Frankie knew that my mother, even when we were in the house, we were always like taking care of her. Like, that's how me and Frankie sort of function. Even me and Frankie, when we had conflicts, but when we were around our mother, we knew she did not know how to function properly, like she needed a lot of help. So I think it's important for me to say this. Now my mother gets older, she gets ran over by a forklift, and it's supposed to get better. Well, who got famous and who had a comfortable life of political power? And it's not going to change. Those are mass murderers. Everyone that's in that president's house and the political powers, and those are mass murderers. And those are Nazis. Those are German Nazis that work there. And my mother always said this, and it's difficult because my mother they used her twin to completely brainwash me and completely dilute who my mother ever was. And once you erase that, you give the credit to someone who never deserved it, You gotta see how crazy this is. My mother's twin shows up before my father's dead in like 3 separate occasions, posing as my mother. And Julian feels very uncomfortable, and he feels defensive. Like, you gotta understand, when me and Julian together, it isn't like a team effort against my mother. He takes action upon himself. And I know you can look to see that he takes action upon himself to think to himself, like to scoop my mother away from my father. But it's not. He knows that it's not my mother, it's my mother's twin. The behavior, it's very murderous. The behavior is and he's dead. it's not going to change the fact that whatever the psychologist told her to do that. And she literally, I remember exactly how she stood and what she did, but it will never change the fact that that was Sarah Cooper in a hidden detective disguise at Taco Bell. This is the situation I'm talking about, Taco Bell. Jillian knows what I'm talking about, on that hill in Fort Worth. And I think it's important because, you know, all that's lost. Frankie is having Frankie's like, they don't want Frankie to have friends because you're more likely to tell some other kid about your anal rapings and getting busted and someone else getting involved because of Michael Jackson, the leader, and the president, ruining what you already have going on. The little boy's running around. He can't even make it to school. It's difficult because we're not asking for millions of dollars. I worked very hard for that money. You don't know, nobody understood that I suffered for that money, that I was following in the footsteps of a child of what my father raised me to do and wanted me to say. And I completely got wiped away. I do blame some of this on Robert Palomo and Michael Palomo. Both of them knew that I think my mother and Julian were twins, and they're not saying anything. Now, what makes this even more worse, when I was dying in the hospital, if my mother doesn't have the power of attorney to show up by herself and can't mentally take care of herself, and I know that she can't, and her identical twin is posing as her, how did my mother, when I got sick and went to the hospital and had to have a bone marrow transplant and nearly died of chemotherapy, how did my mother sign, because my mother has to sign paperwork to surrender Julian because he was a minor. He's under the age of 18 years old. Because he has to go to Children's Medical Center in order to donate his blood, then donate it to the adult. So I think it's important for me to say something about this, about what's going on. You know, it's not going to change that Sarah Cooper knew about it, and she said it right to my face, and Frankie was right there in Julian, and Frankie having his ass ripped open, and literally in front of him, blaming me and pointing the finger at me directly in front of Frankie, who were right there in the porch. King Cooper, Sarah Cooper, Julian, me, and Frankie, as we were leaving. And she goes, you, in front of Frankie. Doesn't even know that Frankie's showing up with bruises the size of a softball on the side of his fucking ribs that are yellow, purple, green, and blue. On his fractured fucking ribs. He's getting punched. And then he gets fucking raped. And she literally, you're not the hero? No, Sarah Cooper is. Kenneth gets what he wants. White power. Oh no, I'm Mexican too. But this is on a scale of, my mother's just a fucking donkey. She's just picking up their luggage and they just do whatever they want, and they get her twins to do whatever they want toward me. But there's nothing that I can do about this. Nothing. And it becomes very dangerous for my life, and it did waste it. And I think it just becomes their purpose, and they know how to just whatever, because the time's gone. But I wanted to make sure that this conversation gets held, because it's very hard. Even when I'm walking through the stores, Frankie's having his ass ripped open. Fucking from 5 years old. The minute that I'm 5 years old, and my uncle, Frankie's 4 years older than me, he's 7 years old, he's being fucking raped the shit out of. And when this happens, who's to say that this didn't happen before? Because if I was 4 years old and I'm telling, hey mom, Frankie's 7, who's to say if I got raped when I was 5 years old, 4 years old, who's to say Frankie didn't get raped when he was 5 years old? Because there's 2 or 3 years between the ages of 4 to 7 years old that he could have been raped. There's 3 years. I didn't even know what was going on. I'm barely learning how to walk and learn how to function. So I think it's important for me to talk about, because the entire time he's being anally just raped by whatever motherfucker. That's a huge amount of fucking people. Now, obviously going to Mexico, that had nothing to do with anything other than just being another victim, including me. But, I think it's important for me to talk about, because as much as Frankie's pushing, he has to have me in the picture in order to have this conversation and make the decision for my mother and make the decision as a whole family. There's no way, because they're going to manipulate and do whatever they want, and they're going to turn it against me. All the suffering and events took place. I'm not there to be part of any kind of family so that Kenneth can go look cool in 97 to be with 50 Cent, and Dr. Dre and be hip hop, because he's pro-black, pro-white, I feel sorry for me, transgender president. I don't take nothing from them. I do nothing to their family. Nobody understands the magnitude of how my mother's being mangled apart, and nobody understands it or gives a shit. Just like when Frankie was being raped. If Frankie knows when I'm staining, my mother always talks to Frankie near the washer. When my mom's cooking. If Frankie knows that my mother knows, and I watch how my mother's face and reaction toward him and how she acts like it, and how she is whenever she knows Frankie's in the corner. They take $175,000. I don't get anything. I get kicked in the ass, and Kenneth is threatening me to tell me you can't get with that girl upstairs because they're all the maintenance person is threatening me, behaving exactly like him. He knows all the details of what happened to that apartment, and he's defending Kenneth. What the fuck does my mother think of this? Oh, you're an adult now. You just got fucked in your ass. It's horrific on how these fucking homosexuals are just wanting to get and steal the credit of anything because my mother doesn't know what the fuck is going on. And the only person is me, and that's why they come after me. So I think it's important for me to say something about this because I know they went after Michaela, and I know they went after my biological father, and I know they went after Michaela's mother, 100%. 100%. Because her mother's very beautiful. She's a beautiful German white woman. But they went after her for sure. I've seen it before. Michaela, they went after your mother. I saw that shit at the church. I saw that shit. I was there. I was fucking there. I saw what happened. So I think it's important for me to talk about Frankie's having his ass ripped open. You don't understand that. The way I would have used this, if I knew at 20 years old, I would have said, if everybody in that family, I was waist deep in shit. I was neck deep in all this shit. Throwing myself right into the pits of the fucking snakes to figure out what the fuck I could get. From Sarah, Ken, figure out their body language, figure out what the fuck they know, how do I sense about them, get an overall... Because if there's no connection, you're not going to know anything. Because I don't know any information. And this is how I can start sizing things up to why. Because I even mentioned to Sarah, why does my mother... As I know my mother had all this conflict. And I talk about this because my mother's not going to remember these things. And Sarah and her team is the one that did this to my mother. And me. And they did this... I'm dying in a fucking hospital. I have Sarah Cooper there and, Ken Cooper and Kenneth to milk me. What are they? Oh, because your mother's just stupid. She's a stupid bitch that doesn't know what the fuck's going on. And that's exactly what she is. Because it's time for the president. I was homeless, sleeping next to a trash can. It's just different psychology, isn't it? That's the reality of life. That you'll get a better life by doing more evil. If you're in the right position. There's some people that there's just for some reason things happen the way that they do so much evil, there's so much garbage digging and selfish greed, self-absorbed scavengers and the most precious value of things, and nothing punishment happens to them. And when it does, it doesn't matter of the conflict because it was all out of selfish and greed. And they're going to continue lying. And they're going to have their people beating my mother. Just like they beat the fuck out of Frankie not to say nothing. Just how they beat my mother and fucked her not to say nothing. They have $175,000. The World Trade Center fucking collapsed. I met Michael Jackson. I saved my brother from at least 7 to 8 of these. And the other ones I had to be with him to get raped and molested. And what do I get? I was just smoking meth for 6 months. Living alone in my apartment without a mother and father when my dad's dying in a fucking nursing home while Michael's fucking punking my ass out inside the fucking house saying that's his fucking house. There wasn't any one person that could ever tell you that walked into my house and say, that's Michael's fucking house, man. He's punking your fucking ass out. And I had people even tell me, you need to take control of your shit. You need to take control, man. Like, I was just letting people walk through that door and he just took control. So, I think it's important because, I was in a very bad beaten situation, no food, and I think it's important because, my suffering and everything, I have to just think of the poor African children and other people that suffered in life, but Frankie was being anally raped the entire time. And when you give money and you give a house and you just say they are going to take, and they're just comfortable, it doesn't change the fact that I'm not going to get it. My life is limited. My life is limited. And it's just like trash. Just like my sister got beaten and fucking, who knows if she ever got molested or raped. Because I've heard of Down syndrome kids being raped and molested, is to say that that I'm no different than that dead corpse just thrown in a garbage can. Just fuck you with my worthless life. Fucking die. It'll be a body in a bag. Just like you see a dead squirrel or a dead fucking rat, lifeless. People just kind of, let me see, and then, figure out how we're going to move forward from, this. And so I think it's important for me to talk about because that's the reality of it. And it's hard because there was no credit that I got from my mother and I suffered for it. You use my mother's sister's twin and they're all covering up. And I think it's the Marines and I think it's the fucking Army psychologists that go and take those careers that are persecuting that did this. It was the homosexuals that did this fag shit. Frankie's having his ass ripped in the entire time, and I'm the one there, the deterrent the whole time. I'm the whole fucking time. And so when people think I'm aggressive when I'm 16 or I wasn't an aggressive kid or disrespectful to my mother, nobody understands what's going on. If you saw like this Veterans Night when we went to this bar and how Frankie just shows up and he was just grabbing you by the hand and taking you to the bathroom and raping you. Exactly like that. It was that easy. It was that fucking easy. The way Patricia just grabbed my hand and just like that, because it was that easy. Because they break you down and it's prison. And the police officers have been successful with the gay community and the whites that had thrown me in prison because I had so-called been a man and fight or pulled out a knife and did the thug thing. You would have never heard my story of how many rapes about Frankie, my mother, the money. Who got the money now? But there's not going to be any justice table for that. But I wanted to make this discussion because it's important. It's hard because I walk to the grocery stores and I, go to sometimes these places and I'm just constantly, it bothers that the entire time he's having his ass ripped open. And I don't understand that I'm risking my fucking life, and I did risk my life. I get nothing for it. My whole future of my life, I was preparing for start businesses, school. I had such a good, healthy mind. They took everything. Just came and just stole everything. They just took everything. Frankie's doing prison time in a fucking cage for fucking 15 years. No friends. Just stay in your fucking little box. And it was Ken Cooper and Sarah Cooper's fault. And then it wasn't Ken. This is masterminding situation. So I thought I'd talk about it for a little while, but it's hard. I go about my business and, I think people feel sorry for starving kids in other places and parts of the world, but this is my own fucking brother and he's just having his own fucking ass ripped open. I'm asking him to come all the way from fucking Japan to figure out what the fuck's going on about this money in this house, what happened to the money, and I'm about to die in a fucking hospital. The whole hospital situation wasn't a big deal, but the idea that watching, knowing that how he's behaving, I'm watching how my mother's, what she's doing, he doesn't have normal. Some kids don't have normal childhood. He just being fucking raped, and you give this money and say, "Oh, that's what I gave." That's what you gave yourself. And they did it on purpose. But there's still questions I have about other situations, like Nick Carrera. Whenever I went with Richard Murphy to go see his mother, we went to Prosper. Prosper is an all-white neighborhood. This is where the real rich white people live. This is like the super wealthy. This is one step below everyone having a $10 million house. I went to this house, it was $1 million. And I talked to Nick Carrera's mother, and I saw Nick Carrera's stepfather. This is a white guy. But I don't know what the circumstances were. And I think it's important to talk about. Because Nick Carrera, I don't know, Nick Carrera's dad told me his mom didn't really want to take care of him. And he told me that she didn't want to take care of him. And he took care of him, raised him. Mr. Carrera did. But, I think to myself that, how much of any of this was secretly behind. Because if my mother got a house and I'm 18 years old, I'm 19 years old, and I'm going over there. My mom already has a house, or planning to get a house. How many other people know about this? What the heck's going on? Because I went to Prosper, and I stayed, I don't know if we stayed there the night. I think we could have. I don't think, it was a long time ago. And they lived in a mansion. It was a pristine appliances, like the one you see. It was like almost better than the ones you see in Dream Makeovers. It was like the Dream Home Makeovers. It wasn't just it was like, how like when you go to these Prosper houses, because when I was a little kid, I used to go driving around and look at Christmas trees in other people's rich houses, and that's what we used to do when I was a kid with Frankie, and I think we did this with Jillian a couple times too. We used to drive around and just look at the Christmas trees of the rich people, just to look at the Christmas trees. And we used to also look at the houses, all the rich people's houses, and be like, oh, I'd like that big house, and I want this big house. Or, it's like, oh, that's such a pretty house. He goes, yeah, let's go take a look. I was very young. I was like 9 years old, 8 years old, doing this with my mother. I was very young. It was before my dad committed suicide. But I think it's important for me to talk about because, it doesn't change the fact, I'm not trying to point the finger at Carrera family, his mom or that white guy, but I just know when I got there, it was like Nick Carrera has two stepbrothers, one stepbrother and a stepsister, and I met them and I seen them a couple times, and they live in that rich neighborhood house. They're married to that white guy, but I thought it was important for me to talk about because people's hidden secrets and what they did in their life and all the situation it was bad. Like, whoever got involved, the fact that I'm the soul of that, I'm the absolute storyteller of this entire house, and money, and my father and my mother and the rapes, I got nothing. I walk out with $14,000 out of the house, $6,000 and $8,000 for the house, and I had nothing, no family, no nothing, and I hated my mother. And even though I was angry at my mother, you don't understand that how much it's like my mother just can't control herself. She doesn't understand. And that's why, because I didn't like this guy, and I was right the whole time. I always talked about this. And I don't think he's entirely a monster. That's what I don't think. I don't think he's entirely a monster. He also knew there was other predators. He did. But I think it's important. He would have definitely stood his ground against Sarah. I tell you that. Against Sarah and Ken, he would have, which would have been good. But I think it's important because, I know how my mother used to talk and all this, but, all that's theirs. I have no business, and I'm not trying to steal my mother's property, whatever anyone else gave her. If someone bought her a house, I don't want to lay a finger on it. I'm not going to say, lay my finger on her, I don't want to step into the house. I have no right to even walk on that sidewalk or grass. Someone gave that to you. I have no way, but anything for my father and the winning in that house and all that did does. But anyone that gives, just like people give away free cars and give away houses, a lot of hip hop artists and people, oh, I want to buy my mom a house when I get rich. So I feel I gave something to my mother. First of all, I'm never going to be doing that. And because obviously someone already did that, the rich people did. Ken and Sarah bought my mother a house. But, the idea of the situation of everything back with my mother, with the house and the rapes, my dead sister, that all that credit and equity does belong to me. But it didn't because of them. And all they did is use Kenneth. And you got to understand that it's everyone that's in the fight for them. They want to put me in that mental state and put Frankie like they did me, and like they did my brother Frankie, raping him, just like they did to me in several ways, because they wanted to cover it up for Michael Jackson and the president. That's why. And it was a full white supremacist. They know how to penetrate. They know how to say, oh, okay, I'm now a Mexican. Oh, okay, now you're just half white. Oh, okay, now you're just white. You're just not racist. Bullshit. But I think it's important for me to say this because I think a story needs to get told. I'm not the professional. They already divided the piece of the pies. They know what portion goes to what. They decided. They literally stole. You gotta understand that nothing I talk about here, anytime I talk about the house, I'm talking with me, Frankie, and Julian. Frankie has to have his input, and Julian has to have his input, and that's it. Half of that goes to my mother. Half of that, us three, and we decide the morals and the credibility of what had happened in that house. No, they took everything. I'm being anally raped. Oh, here's a house and here's new kids. How are you going to stop the kids? Oh, here's Frankie getting raped by 10 men. Michael Jackson for Keno. So I think it's important for me to say all they're doing is brainwashing me because they want to feel empathetic for this piece of shit. That he's a hero, he can tolerate more. No, let's feel sorry for him more. No, at least I had a better life than you because it's Ken and Sarah's kid. Transgender movement. So my mother doesn't give a shit I got raped. Her sister, her twin that's been identifying for her, she just doesn't give a fucking rat's ass about the transgender. She doesn't. They know if she's a lesbian or doesn't have a relationship with a man or have any kids, 100% works for the gays. That's why. So I think it's important for me to talk about because the disposal of what they did to the immediate family that, me and Frankie talked about it, me and with Julian, and, we all three, when we were together, we all felt great, and I felt great. It was just like, it was great for us to be together. It was really great. Like it was a unique energy. People talk about that it's a unique bond energy. Everyone talks about it, that even when you do have conflict, when you have your own brother, you have your own sister, like you grew up with them, or they're your blood, there's something special about that, unique, that's separated completely from anybody that isn't. And I think that that's important for me to touch base with that, because even Frankie's giving his free car away to Julian. Like, I thought I'd talk about it. I'm not the one that's separating. Let me make this clear. Everything. One second. Hold on, I gotta pull these. Boiling some eggs with some protein help my muscles. Has 9 amino acids to help the muscles and brain. So hopefully it helps a little bit on the test. But I want to make this very clear. Very clear. I personally don't want to step into the house. I just don't want to be a part of any of it. I have no right. I'm not here to disrespect any giveaway you gave my mother. What this whole retaliation and revenge and bitterness or whatever you want to call it, or justice, they think that any of this is whatever it is that you think of this and the horrors of rapes and the money being stolen from my dead dad and my dad's sister being disposed of for, Sarah's Cooper's glory, that's her soulmate and she's the angel that watches over Sarah Cooper. Whatever you want to make this, all together, my mother's house, I want nothing to do with. The Dream Makeover's house, that's hers. I respect that. I have no right. Someone bought you a house, that's a gift that someone gave you. That is yours. But whatever happened that they used with that to take away from my father, Frankie, and Julian, and personally me, that was why. Now that's what I had the problem with. She raising your kids, like if I got this big lump sum, check and money, that, man, it would have been better because, it would have been fairly divided, but the morals and the morality of what happened in that house and the injustice will never be fixed. Money can never fix that. Money will never fix that. But the house and all that stuff, that's hers. Appliances, you gave her a car, that's not mine. But for me, if, every kid in this world wants to buy their mommy a fucking car and a house that didn't grow up very wealthy. I don't buy my mother shit. I don't have anything because they gave the money to their kids and they're manipulating, they're using your twin in the psychology, brainwashing bullshit. But yeah, it doesn't change. It is a very, very steep price to pay through life, and it can never be justified and fixed because of what had happened. And it was strictly, Kenneth knew about the rapes and he was taunting the situation. I was spilling the beans and every fucking word that I could say to fucking Sarah and Ken and sizing them up, and not because I don't have time to say everything, but to get fucking answers to reactions. Kenneth, it's just pure manipulation. The things that I go through, I 100% bullet point, long shot sniper, I know exactly what happened, what's going on. But they don't care. They want to keep them safe. They want to keep them supremacist. They want us to say, transgender, the political power. That's all it is. It doesn't. When somebody says whether you're going to live or die, it's just like they're going to the death row. You really didn't do it. They're going to kill you anyway. No governor is going to give you a fucking call that says, just don't kill him. It's not going to happen to kill you anyway, even if you didn't do it. And there's a lot of people that went to prison 60 years, 40 years, and they found out through DNA evidence they didn't do it. And throughout DNA evidence, they figured out they didn't do it. Doesn't change the fact how much money you're going to get. Doesn't change the fact they're not going to go back to the courtrooms. They're not going to go back to these people and find out and say, okay, let's persecute these people for what they did. They're not going to do that. It's never going to happen. It's just lost. And that can't ever be repaid. So, but as far as it goes with this particular situation that Frankie being raped, and it's I don't have any right. And I've always felt this way. I don't say I always necessarily, but yeah, I've always had my intentions to say, okay, if somebody gives you this free house and car, I have no connection to it. You're just using that money to bury my sister and my father for the gay community. That's fucking why. And for the rapes, for Michael Jackson and the president. That's exactly why the fuck you did it. And you used the people to do it. That's what fucking happened. So that's what I have a problem with. But as far as living a Dream Makeover's children, it sounds like a dream. It's the whole 10 yards. It's the whole 10 yards. You take your kids to the park, you dress them up as twins, and you're going to the parks and you're going to all these, and you get to give your kid little kisses, and from people are always like, oh my God, twins, oh how special, how twins, oh special twins. Frankie was just walking around with a ripped ass, blood coming out of his fucking ass the entire time. And it happened to me several times. And my father kills himself in front of me. I'm going to a nursing for 7 years. If I know I'm going to get as much credit, well, you know what? Kill yourself in front of me, and you're drinking all the fucking time. Am I just after your money or just following your? No, because my high school teachers is what fuck who did that to me. You just don't know about it. I still have that envelope to send my mother. So on all those pictures of those high school students, and I already made a video on that. So I thought I'd make a video. You do what you want, as far as that, I don't have any right to say anything. I can't do nothing about that. That's not my money. But that is my money about how they use that money against, that's why. It was for Michael Jackson and the movement of gay community and for the whites. That's exactly 100%. But the attitude is fucking different. I know how the communication with the homosexuality, the gay union and the gays, the parades they have. What makes me understand more about this whole gay situation is blacks have it really bad. And I mean, they have it really fucking bad. And I understand how my dad used to say that because all the work, even co-workers, and being around blacks, the gay community was very racist toward the blacks. A lot of them, many of them. And it was no different. And most of them were all gay. All of them that were gay, every one of them were racist as fuck. Saying the word nigger all the time and racist, get that black away, or it was just, and they're supposed to be, the rainbow colors of the flag, we all unite, no more racist. That's bullshit. And they use that whole situation to say, they're the ones that are being damaged, and that's not the truth. And they use that as a clan, like a Ku Klux Klan. So thought I'd make a video. I don't have any business talking about. I don't have any business to lay a finger. I don't care for it at all. And I just know that Frankie and me and Frankie talking about it, we would have been like, damn, it would have been cool, growing up, Julian having his twin, but it would have rotted Frankie as a person in a lot of ways, in a different way. And he just understood that this is what I have to do in order to give something to my mother. Really, you gave it to Ken and Sarah, because their prerogative is to turn everything to me against my mother and Frankie. That's the number one thing. And burn the time off. That's the number one thing. And use the gay community and start navigating with them. When you don't know what's going on, all you're going to get is snakes. That's all you're going to get. You're just going to get snakes. I didn't do anything. Snakes. Jesus Christ. Snakes. Snakes. Death. Snakes. Rapes. All. But let me explain. Wait, hold on. Oh. You're just waiting for that. And, it's tough. Do what you want. It's your money.